Okay, this is going to be a little tutorial on how to make our radial symmetry, the 3-axis project. And what I'm going to show you, you can apply to the 4-axis and the 5-axis. This is going to be done in Illustrator, which is in many ways quite different than Photoshop. And like we talked about the other day, it is a vector-based program as opposed to a bitmap-based program. So one of the big differences is if you look over here at the bottom, you see these two boxes. One is called the fill and one is called the stroke. And it basically means when you make a shape, it can either be filled or be empty, and you would deselect that. Actually, it would be that one. Uh, and then if you draw something, this represents the line thickness. We don't need to get into a lot of that right now, but I'm just making you aware that basically vectors are lines and shapes. And so this controls a lot of what we're going to do. One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to bring in the image that we made in Photoshop, the symmetrical image, and we're going to do something called a 60-degree clipping mask. And you can see as I highlight this, you can see that there's 6 sections that rotate around a center point. And they've been clipped at 60 degrees, which is the angle we need to make a 3-axis radial symmetrical pattern. And then you can see the 3 major axes, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so why don't we get started? And I'm going to create a new file. So once you open Illustrator, go to File, New, and you'll get a dialog box. And you can set up the sizes based on a series of preset sizes, or you could type in your own. You could say custom, and you could type in your own dimensions. We're going to let's just do letter size right now. It's a kind of a convenient size to work in. If you want to print something out, you can print it out on your home computer at that size. Let's do the orientation at portrait instead of landscape. And then this may not be clicked on yours, but you'll see this little thing that says advanced. And that's what determines your color mode. So we're going to work in CMYK as opposed to RGB. Again, if we were going to do this so it was solely going to be outputted on the web, we do RGB. But we're going to print this. We're not going to print it in a high quality printer, but and it's black and white. It won't make that big a deal. But let's just get used to working in CMYK. And then raster effects, I can explain that a little bit later. But let's go ahead and work at 300 PPI. And then leave the preview mode at default. And let's call this 3-axis radial. Okay, and there's the new box. Okay, make sure that you've got your application bar control tools and then your layers checked. So that's important. And then the other thing that is really useful is to have something called smart guides checked. And what that's going to do is you'll see as we start bringing in images and our clipping mask, it will tell us when various objects align with one another. It's extremely useful, so make sure that's set up. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in our our object that we made. So we're going to go to File, we're going to go Place, and we're going to bring in the radial motif JPEG, Place, and you can see it's quite small. Now, it comes in with a bounding box, and part of that is because I have the selection tool, not the direct select tool. If I hit the direct select tool, you see it loses the bounding boxes. So if you don't see that, hit the direct select tool. That's going to allow us to make this larger, scale it up. Hover the cursor until you get this little double arrow thing. Hit the shift key and then click and drag this so it's about that big. something like that. Now, let's do a little check here. If we hit Command plus several times and we get close, you see how pixelated that is. That means, in fact, it is a bitmap object. And we want to turn it to a vector object. Now, one of the things, as soon as the object is selected, we see this little dialog, and one of them is image trace. And if you click the down arrow, you can see that there's a variety of things that you can do. Now, we have just a black and white image, so just working on default will just be fine. You know, maybe as you bring in your images from your artifact, you might want to play with this. You can do things where it turns it into a sketch, a silhouette, into line art, a technical drawing, low fidelity, high fidelity, but it does turn them all into vectors. So we just want a really simple vector, so we're going to go back, select it, and we're just going to click on image trace. Now, let's do this again. Look at this. As I get closer, the lines remain super crisp. So that means, in fact, that now we have a vector object and not a bitmap object, and it is not resolution dependent. Okay, so what I want to do is now I'm going to make my vector mask, or my clipping mask. So I want to pull this object out of the way. We really need to do this in one layer, and it can get a little bit tricky because the clipping mask needs to be on top of the object. So we're just going to pull this out of the way for the moment. And what we want to do is set up the geometry. So we want something that's basically a 60-degree V-shape object that we're going to use as the clipping mask. So one of the simplest ways to do it, and as in all things Photoshop and Illustrator, there are multiple ways of doing this, but let's do it this way. You might figure out a simpler way to do it, but this is one that's easily applied to all different geometries. So select the line tool, and if you don't see it, maybe hiding behind the arc tool, the spiral tool, the rectangular, or the polar grid tool. So hit that, and you'll see a little plus. Now, see that little green thing? That means it's either the center. Right here, it's aligning with the center of my object. Here, it's aligning with the center of the page. So that's what's called the Smart Guide. This little green highlight shows up, and it shows you all kinds of alignment options. So click on this, and then you see this dialog that comes up. I want a line that goes straight down, and I want it to be 3 inches. So type in 3 inches, and then type in 270. If I type in 0, it will be a line that is perfectly horizontal. If I type in 90, it's a line that is vertical, but it goes up from the center point. So I want one that comes down. It wouldn't matter if you did it up, you're just going to have to move it and hit OK. Now, what I need to do is get the geometry right. So this is a vertical line. I need an angle that is 30 degrees, but because I want to center it on here, I need to rotate each one of these lines at 30 degrees and negative 30 degrees. So what I'm going to do is it's selected, and I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, which is the same as Command C, and then Edit, Paste in Front, and then I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and Rotate. And what I want to do is I want to rotate it 30 degrees, not 60 degrees. Hit OK. So there it is right there. I'm going to go to the direct selection tool, which allows me to pick it up and just move it. I'm going to move it out of the way. Now I'm going to select this guy. I don't really need to make a copy because I don't need anything to remain, so I'm going to rotate this guy. So I'm going to go Object, Transform, Rotate, but I want it in the opposite direction, so I'm going to go negative 30. Hit OK. Now, I'll just zoom in here and you can see what I'm going to do. What I want to do is I want these two guys to line up, and I want their anchor points to clink to one another, and it looks like they did. All right. Then the next thing I want to do, I need something that's basically an encompassing shape. And you notice over here, since I'm just working with lines, only the stroke is set. I don't want the fill in here. Um, what I'm going to do now is I need to cap this off, and I'm going to go to the pen tool. The pen tool will be maybe hiding behind some of these other anchor and pen tools. I'm going to make the stroke set at 1. I could set it at anything, but 1 is fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to uh, right click and then come over and right click again. And now I'm not going to release the click, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically drag the mouse down, or my scroll options on my touchpad. And I just want to make a shape that is going to allow me to encompass other aspects within this image. So something like that is good. Now, the thing is not connected together. So what I need to do, go to the selection tool, and right now it's just showing me that this and this are now a group, but it doesn't include this. So I'm going to grab all 3. Let me try it again here. Then I'm going to go to Object, Group. Now, what that should mean is I should be able to click on this and move it, and it moves as a group. That's good. That's what we want. Okay.